Books teach us, they inspire us, they challenge us, and they expand our horizons. Books contain the best thoughts of the greatest minds in history, but the problem is, there are millions to choose from. So what should you invest your time reading? What should you spend your money on? How do you sort through all the bullshit and find the good shit? You let the superior men do the work. Matt and Jay take the best books, pick the most important points, and distill them down to a concentrated 30-minute podcast. We help you find the books you need to read and why you need to read them. You may even learn something. So take out your coffee, tea, a glass of wine, or a good IPA. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome to the Superior Men Bookcast.
And welcome back to the Superior Men Bookcast. I am your host, Jay, here with my fellow host, Sir Matthew.
I am Jack's broken heart.
You are Jack. You are all jacked if you're listening to this podcast, because today's podcast is about the absolutely spectacular Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk.
I've seen that movie.
Don't start. Don't start, sir. We're not even there yet.
Let's go.
This is if you know Fight Club, you probably know Fight Club from the movie. That's in fact how most of us got there. It's how I got there. But many of you did not know that there was a novel that came before, and the novel is fantastic, and that is what we are discussing today. What is it about?
Yeah,
that's the question.
It is.
What is it about? Tell me about this book.
So, those of you who've seen the movie, you'll see a lot of stuff here when we're talking about here. But basically, what the book is about. So every weekend, the basements and parking lots of bars across the country, young men with white-collar jobs and failed lives take off their shoes and shirts to fight each other barehanded. So it just follows the psychopathy of our protagonist, which is great. And what's he going through? Like what is the purpose? What is this Fight Club? What are they trying to do? What are they going through? What are they getting to?
It is it's a dark satire. Very dark satire. And it's about anarchy, it's about violence, it's about purposelessness.
Yes.
And
what is your purposelessness?
Like it's kind of one of those books and movies and stories where we start out the story. In fact, we do start out the story with the gun in your mouth going, you're going to die.
Right. And wait a second. We need to rewind a little bit.
Yeah. You're going to die. Let's go back. But really, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And that challenge, that concept, I think is really, as I read through it, that's what Palahniuk is trying to force the reader up against.
Yeah. He's
and
really
specifically. Yeah.
Specifically men. So specifically
yes.
men, and trying to get look, this is not what a man is. This is a consumerist lifestyle. This is, you're safe. This is not what men are meant to do. This is not what we're supposed to do. So who's going to benefit the most from this book?
I would say anybody who has testosterone as their primary hormone.
Right.
They're going to appreciate this. If you like a darker, more violent, more intense story, something that you are going to... It sucks you up. The beginning of it starts you off quick, and then you look up and you don't even know where you are. It will pull you through kind of like a raging river. Anybody who's ever been in a fight will appreciate this. If you've never been in a fight, you will appreciate it a lot more. Anyone who hates authority, government, or rules of any kind, and I think that's funny that this is about anarchists, and yet the primary tenet of the story is the 8 rules of Fight Club.
Right.
Who probably won't like Fight Club, Matt?
Oh, man. So anybody who's into that consumerist lifestyle, you are a huge conformer with whatever everybody tells you to do. Also, if you like, rainbows and unicorns, and those are the stories you like to read, then you're not going to like this much. So how about this one too? So this book, how difficult, how easy difficult is this book to read here, Jay?
It is actually really easy to read, and just like I was saying, it just really pulls you along. The print version's 208 pages. The Audible version is about 6 hours, and I would say probably take about that long to read the actual book as
Right.
well. It's just such an interesting story that you'll get. I think pretty much anybody can get through it in a pretty short period of time. The only reason why it might take you longer is because it is so dark. You might need to take little breaks
Right.
to kind of like reset your reality for a little bit, just because it is so there's a lot of nihilism in there, a lot of darkness. Although Palahniuk himself, you asked him, he's like, isn't this kind of a nihilistic take on the world? He's like, no, I'm a romantic. So
Wow.
where he's coming from. What about the reviews on the book?
So, book was actually released in 1996, so 3 years before the movie. About 2,400 reviews, 4.6 stars. It's currently where it sits the highest is number 6 in Audible for satire fiction. It sits at number 48 on Amazon for the same category, satire fiction. So, how did you find out about this book, Jay?
I had always heard about the book. I first watched the movie when I was in, about the same time that it came out, shortly after it came out,
Right.
in theaters, and it's always just kind of been part of my my worldview ever since then. And honestly, I never really had a strong draw to read the book. And as we've started to do our book review podcast here, I'm kind of like revisiting old books and getting a chance to read this one. It's fantastic. It's so good. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between the book and the movie and how little there actually is in just a minute here. How about you, Matt? How did you find out about Fight Club, the book?
It's funny. Like, yeah, Fight Club, the book. It's like to me, it's like sort of saying, like, those of you who watch Spaceballs, where they're like Spaceballs, where they talk about everything with Spaceballs, the plush toys.
Baseball's the blowtorch.
So, honestly, for me, I didn't know that this was a book for the longest time. I probably didn't know it was a book until, I don't know, a handful of years ago. And so Chuck Palahniuk, I didn't know his name, and it's probably not a household name, but has, his writing style is amazing. And then when I saw it and I got the book, I actually think I listened to it on Audible, and it was one of these deals where I was like, I was just blown away by the book, and it was like, wow, this is fantastic. Again, we'll talk about movie and book stuff here in just a second, but no, it like didn't even know it was a book. It was one of those things, like, I had no idea. Just thought it was an awesome movie and leave it at that.
Well, it's one of those books that when you find out that it exists and you read it, you're like, oh man, I was missing out.
Yeah,
this whole
absolutely. Because it's not this, like Jay said, it probably only take you 6-ish hours. It may even, if you're a quick reader or whatever, 5 to 6 hours, whatever, to read it. And totally worth it. Like, it's not one of these books that's like, well, it's like reading, The Stand by Stephen King. It's not like that where, you need to dedicate like a month to read it. So
no, there's it'll get in and get out, but you'll remember it.
Yep, absolutely. So give us a little history on Chuck Palahniuk.
Sure. Chuck Palahniuk's really an interesting guy. He is born 1962. He is, as of 2020, in when we're recording this podcast, he is 58 years old. He grew up in a mobile home park in Burbank, Washington. Parents divorced when he was 14, moved in with his grandparents on their cattle ranch in eastern Washington. And then if you dig into his past, find out that he
has a very good, bright, sunshiny past.
He did not have the sweetest background. His grandparents, and I was unable to find out which set of grandparents it is, but one of his sets of grandparents, his grandfather, kind of lost his marbles, and then things got really bad. Murdered his grandmother and then shot himself. So that obviously has to affect you a little bit. But he shook things off, graduated University of Oregon journalism, 1986, worked as an intern for NPR in Eugene, Oregon, because everybody is a liberal in Oregon. Wrote for the local paper, then worked for Freightliner as a diesel mechanic. Wrote manuals on fixing trucks, so you can get kind of a sense of his technical style of writing, in the way that he will break things down very logically, very kind of like matter-of-factly. And in a way, I think that makes the violence in his work a little bit more intense because it feels so, nuts and bolts. And he tore his head off here. And you're like, ooh, it was so descriptive. Did volunteer work for a homeless shelter and drove terminally ill patients around until one of them died. And then he kind of that was a little bit too much for him. But the group meetings, the support group meetings, that was kind of his first introduction to that. And you'll hear about that in the book for sure. Began fiction writing his mid-30s. His first novel, Invisible Monsters, was rejected by every publisher and wasn't published until after Fight Club was successful. It was only his fourth novel, Choke, that actually finally made it to the bestseller category. So he kept banging his head against this whole concept of literary success for a while, which is surprising to anybody who's read his stuff because he's so brilliant. It's just hard, basically, to be successful as a writer. He writes in the transgressive fiction category, so he writes about sunshine and rainbows, like you were saying.
Sunshine and rainbows.
Wait, no, he doesn't. Death cults, teenager who dies and goes on a tour of hell, ritual magic, spirit possession, a porn actress attempting to break the world record for serial fornication with 600 men in a row, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, light topics. So
light topics.
Let's talk.
That's what he likes. Let's talk about the book, though.
So
this book movie combo.
Yeah, so super quick, right? So the movie was released in 1999, book 1996. So just 3 years later, you make this movie with a whole bunch of giant stars at the time, right? And really, you're like, and I was surprised that the movie really didn't do all that good in the box office. Like, we were looking at it, and it only grossed like 100 million. Worldwide, so it was only like 40 million or something in the US, and it cost 60 something million. So they're gonna call that a flop for the box office, but it did really, really well later. And I think there's many of those kinds of movies that they do well later. It was maybe ahead of its time, and that's part of what we could say. Like, if you were to read this book, watch the movie, whatever, it's a completely ahead of its time. This book, or the book was 25 years ago, roughly, right? And that's when it was written, and the story for the movie, right, would be the same, but it's just as true if you were to watch it or read it now than it was 25 years ago. So it is, in my opinion, it is the best movie or book to movie translation, hands down. Just, there's not even the way stylistically that they go through it with the movie captures those elements of a book that are really difficult to do. With Edward Norton's narration and blah blah blah. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So, like, I think it's I think it's really good there. But let's go into some of the table of contents here just real briefly. And it really talks about like the the emasculation of modern men. So that modern men are just sort of like a paycheck, and you need to have all these other things. And remember, looking through in the movie, if you have that picture of Edward Norton's his IKEA catalog, and if he just had more things, everything would be amazing and wonderful if he just had this new end table. So very a consumeristic approach, and then has that chance.
No matter what happens, you got that couch thing covered.
Exactly.
You're done.
Exactly.
You have a lot of modern solutions, or a lot of solutions for modern living. It's pretty much your house is more or less taken care of. Your stuff is taken care of. But what do you get as a result of filling that up?
Right. And then one of the big themes is violence with the actual fight clubs themselves, society, and what is society, and why we have the actual structure the way that we do, what our priorities are in society. And then one of the other subtexts definitely is the absent father figures. So what we have there. So here, let's go in real quick, and we're kind of rushing through some of these things. I want to make sure we get to some of these other parts. So, Jay, what did you like best about the book?
Oh man, I think this is one of those books, kind of like taking a shot of Everclear. I kind of like what it does to me, and the experience itself is a little bit uncomfortable. And I think part of the reason why it's so challenging is that the violence doesn't bother me so much, but it's much more like it forces you to answer questions, especially every guy needs to answer these questions about what would you fight for? How can you know anything about yourself if you haven't been in a fight? And a lot of modern guys were taught to be soft and gentle and sweet and not to fight for stuff. And Fight Club goes right 100% violently into the face of that and says this is wrong. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're very true. It just kind of goes like, look, what is the essence of man? The essence of man isn't being more feminine. And that is definitely the push on there. So that's good. So give us a quote or two.
There's so many good quotes in here, really.
Yes.
There's two that I really like. Tyler's talking about just this whole culture and saying, advertise us has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, and why the modern within the last couple of years here, why the modern minimalist movement has gained so much ground, because people are realizing, hey, guess what? We don't need all this stuff. We can be even happier without it, because as one of the movie's taglines goes, the stuff you own ends up owning you.
Well, so it's like the whole thing on when you see on whatever Discovery Channel, those people who live in like the tiny little houses, sort of like the complete counterculture to like living in a mansion. You live in a tiny little house.
Right. And you could be just as happy or happier with less. So,
sure.
Right. That's a big deal. And then the second one is Marla's self-description for herself. She said, this girl, she's talking about herself in the third person, this girl's infectious human waste, and she's confused and afraid to commit to the wrong thing, and so she won't commit to anything. And I feel like that's a very, very powerful statement about being connected to something, and whether or not you're right or wrong, it's better to make the wrong choice and dig into it and take the hits than it is to sit waffling in the background and not commit. And to me, females don't speak much in this book. She's really the voice for all females in the book, and that quote just really I love it.
Yeah, well, and she's not a wonderful representation of all females. However, But no, she's that is good. That's
Nobody's their best self in this book.
No.
But you get like, I think that's exactly it. A big key component of this book is stripping away all the layers and finding out what you are underneath. And so we kind of sift through what's left and figure out what's actually there. And I think there's some truth to that. And one of the things that's valuable to me about it.
Yeah, no, great. So what did you learn from this book?
It reminds me, and even going back through and reading this book, I mean, I've watched the movie, I don't know how many times, but reading the book, it just really kind of put front and center again this concept of like, if you're going to really change something in your life, it's going to be painful. Yeah. It's going to be hard. It's not easy. It's never easy. And it's something that we talk about a lot with our writing and our podcasts. It's this embrace the suck concept, because guess what? If you want something different, it's going to hurt. And Palahniuk goes right into the face of that and goes, yep, this is 100% accurate. And I like that.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with you on that one. What do you like the least?
This is just me, because I feel like I have a history of clinical depression, back when years ago, and kind of suffering through that. So I think it taps a nerve there, but it almost feels like Palahniuk is a little bit suicidal as he's writing the book. There's one scene where the mechanic is driving the car, and they're all in the car, and they're driving against traffic. Whether or not the car that's coming at them is going to hit them, it depends on the other driver. And it's this feeling of like, we're going to die someday, so maybe now is a good time to try it. We have a near life experience by putting yourself up against something that could kill you immediately. And I feel like, in a sense, Palahniuk is maybe pushing himself at that point as he's writing this, going, is this real? I don't know. It felt a little bit too realistic, kind of like Sylvia Plath in The Bell Jar, talking about that kind of suicidal stuff. And then later on, she killed herself, like actually in real life. And right. So I don't know, that it felt a little bit too real for me. So that was a little bit uncomfortable. But, I don't know. I'd like to ask Palahniuk about that, in fact.
Yeah.
So I mean, that.
So that leads in, actually. So is that with a question that you would ask him, is that something?
I would.
Would that be your question you would be asking him?
One of the questions I definitely would ask him. I'd also like to ask him about some fights he's been in.
I think that would be good too. What about anything else? Any other connected books or anything like that?
I've read the novel Choke. About a sex addict named Victor, who's a con man who pretends to choke in public diners, and then when people come and save his life, he's so grateful and they feel sorry for him, so they give him money, and he uses that money to pay his mother's retirement home bills. So the movie's actually good too, with Sam Rockwell, highly recommended. So it's just, he's so weird and so uncomfortable, but at the same time, there is kind of like this level of sweetness underneath it. So I would say check Choke out. He's written over a dozen novels. Every single one of them, as far as I can tell, is equally uncomfortable and bizarre and weird and transgressive. And if you liked Fight Club, you'll probably enjoy all of them. Right. Yeah. So that's briefly my perspective. What about you, Matt? What do you like best about this book?
So I love going back to, say, like, your undertones of what society is and what our ideas of what's important, our priorities in society. And this book to me really questions what those priorities are, what they should be. And I guess specifically looking at this, I think probably there's probably a lot of women who have either, who have watched the movie or know of the movie or whatever, just like, oh, this is stupid. And I get that. And I think that's really, the movie is made for men, or the story is made for men. And it's a transformative story where you're going, look, we're going out from what our society is telling us is what's important, we're going back to what is actually as important to men. And that's what we should be looking at. Now, I'm not saying going out and starting underground fight clubs is the answer, but it's an interesting thought where you go, no, look, we need this. We need an outlet in order to behave in this sort of feminine way that we are sort of forced to in society.
An opportunity to figure out what masculinity looks like for our own selves.
Right. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like The Way of Men. So
yeah.
Very,
very similar to The Way of Men. I kept thinking about connections also between those. Oh,
yeah.
Good thought there. What about favorite quote or two?
Oh my goodness. So I had a quote, and it's a very simple one, right? So this is your life, and it's ending one moment at a time. And I actually had that quote printed up and out like on my desk for a couple years, because to me that is such a powerful quote. You're looking at, what are you doing? This is your life. Whether you're sitting here, you're sleeping, you're watching a movie, you're doing whatever, you're still passing time, you're still passing your life, and it is ending 1 minute at a time or one moment at a time. What else, what are you doing to better yourself and better your existence?
That's a good one. I want to hear other quotes, but don't quite have enough time for them.
Yep.
And I want to hear more. What did you learn from this book?
So really, I think what I learned from this is to go and find like your purpose and really listen to your inner self, and don't take what society has as gospel and what you should be doing. Don't listen to others' expectations of you. Take your own, figure that out for yourself.
That's such a good, if you run with that, basically you could start any number of different things. Like Tyler Durden is, we don't want to give away the story, but Tyler Durden, one guy was able to make massive changes,
right,
just from digging into his own deep beliefs.
Yep.
So what can you change? What could you change in your life and in the world around you if you follow your own beliefs? Oh, that's great. What do you like least?
So I think your own beliefs, I think the movie, and it's sort of similar, I'm not going to say the suicide thing, but just a nihilistic approach where just like basically the ultimate meaning is that nothing matters. And I don't agree with. But the path and the process I agree with, but the end goal is not nihilism.
Okay. So kind of like this is a goal these are kind of like techniques to try and figure out what the answer is, but it's like the end goal. We don't necessarily need to say that nothing is you.
Right.
Nothing matters.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Got it. What about questions you would ask Mr. Palahniuk?
Well, and it would be related to that. It would basically be like, is his worldview a nihilistic worldview, or is this just like going in through this character, and this character's ending up at a nihilistic worldview?
See whether or not he's in alignment with that, or he's just kind of like trying it on to see whether or not that's where he was at.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about related books? Or maybe movies.
So I would just put on here that for me, I like, and it's next on my to read is a novel called Survivor by Chuck Palahniuk, and so I haven't read this one yet, so I don't know it yet, but based on all of the reviews, it looks like this is going to be a very kind of similar style. So.
Gotcha. So the novel Survivor.
Yep.
All right. Any last thoughts here, just for guys who are thinking, should I or should I not read this book? What do you tell them?
I am Jack's complete lack of surprise.
We are Jack's highly recommending podcasters. This book is one of those things that every man needs to read a couple of times, and it's going to ask you questions that you need to be able to answer. no matter where you are in your life.
And if you don't, you need to find out the answers to that. So I
Yes.
think it's very, very big, and you definitely need to watch the movie and read the book. You need to do both. They're fantastic.
Get both of them under your skin, and it will change you. Once again, the book Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. Thank you so much, guys, for listening here to the Superior Men Bookcast. We'll talk to you soon.
A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. Thank you for listening to the Superior Men Bookcast. Share it with a friend. You heard our thoughts. Go read it for yourself.